I am pretty excited about the news coming out of Stern, it has to be said. Now, you please must excuse me if I get some of the information slightly wrong. I don't have any sort of insider contacts. I get this news the same time as you guys. I don't have the contacts inside the industry that someone like Canada does. I don't get the breaking news like Nap Arcade. I don't have close associations with manufacturers like Carrie Hardy. I'm just getting the news the same time as you, probably, possibly even a little bit later. But it doesn't stop me being excited about it. And I am excited about the news from Stern. Here's how I understand it. Now, it's sort of twofold. One of the bits of news is that Stern are going to stop doing limited editions. I got to be honest with you, I've never had a limited edition. That news doesn't impact me at all, although I'm very happy to discuss it. The other part of the news is that Stern are going to recreate, should I say, and re-release some of their old DMD games. Now, I don't exactly know what that means. Well, I know what DMD means, right? Dot matrix display. I don't know if that means they are just going to produce them like they used to and just put them out there. I don't know if it means that they're going to upgrade them and update them and give them the LCD screen treatment. Is what we're getting going to be a Spike 2 machine? I don't know. As I say, I don't have this sort of insider information. I'm sure others already know this. I'd like to know on this occasion. I'll tell you why. Because one of their old games is of massive interest to me. And it's Lord of the Rings. I know I talk about the game a lot. It's not just my favourite game. It's there are my favourite books. It's my favourite films. If I were to show you around this cave now, I've got statues, got Lord of the Rings statues, got sideshow statues, all sorts of memorabilia from Lord of the Rings. I love it. I can't get enough of it. I used to have a game. I only sold it because I had a bit of a problem. I crashed. I had a car crash and couldn't work, so I needed to bring some funds in, so I had to sell it. And it has been my intention to get a Lord of the Rings. In fact, it may well be the next pinball machine I get, Lord of the Rings. And that was before I heard this news. And now I'm thinking, hold on. If Stern are going to release a Spike 2 Lord of the Rings, that would be of huge interest to me. Look, there are other titles to discuss, and we'll discuss them in just a second. But in terms of the Lord of the Rings, having owned that game, what I do remember about that game is under the playfield glass, it was almost like a museum to the film. It was very much a world under glass. I know the artwork on the playfield was just photoshopped artwork. I know it wasn't sort of Chris Frenchy artwork in terms of the way he does, this wonderful artwork like he's done here. I know it wasn't Zombie Yeti artwork. But actually, in terms of the models, in terms of the shots, the ring, there are a lot of mechanisms on there. There are a lot of shots, a lot of stuff on there, which I don't think Stern would put on a modern machine. So I think my first concern would be, are we just going to go and get those? Are we still going to get the models? Are we still going to get the models of the Fellowship? Are we going to get Gandalf? Are we going to get the... the Witch King isn't on there, but you know what I mean. Are we going to go and get all of these models that are on there? I think there was, if I remember right, there was an Uruk-hai on there. Or are we going to get the flat pieces of plastic? That would be a disappointment. So I'm sort of holding my opinion until I see it. But either one would suit me. And when I say either one, here's what it is. A complete replica of the last run they did, which was the limited edition, that would do me. I would have it. If it's going to be a lesser version, I would quite happily go out and buy a used Lord of the Rings. Hopefully one with all the mods, the Palantir mod and the Path of the Dead at the top and all that great stuff that's on there. And I think if it was a Spike 2 and it was going to be slightly different with the movie footage on there, then that would be a maybe with the same shots. I'd be very interested in that. And it's interesting seeing what they're going to do, because I was thinking off the top of my head, things like X-Men. I guess they wouldn't reproduce X-Men. What's the point? Would they reproduce Sopranos, for instance? We're going to get into licensing, let's hold that thought for just a second. We've got Game of Thrones, we've got Ghostbusters, big title, massive title, Ghostbusters. Kiss, AC/DC, Spider-Man, Metallica. Somebody mentioned Tron. these are big titles, and I think looking at them, and I'm just listing them, I'm struggling to think of one that is not a license. And the reason I think license is important, because as I understand it, one of the reasons that Jersey Jack Pinball have not reproduced Pirates of the Caribbean is because they don't have the license anymore. My understanding might be poor, but they had a license for a set amount of time. They can't just keep doing them now. I might be completely wrong on that, but that was my understanding of the situation. Is that the case with some of the others? Can they no longer do Spider-Man? I guess they can, because they did the Vault edition. Things like Tron, AC/DC, I guess the music pins are fine, aren't they? Because Metallica's obviously one that really, what a great game that is, really popular game. Unlike some of the others, I like the game Metallica, but I still don't like the music. It's not my kind of music, but the game's excellent. I guess if you've already got permission from the band, you can do it. Maybe a film, maybe a movie is slightly different. And for that reason, I'm slightly concerned about Lord of the Rings. That being said, without boring you to death, the ease with which you can get a Lord of the Rings license now is far easier than it was 20 years ago. It's easier to get permission from the Tolkien estate. Now, they used to be very, very precious. Hey, get the joke? They used to be very, very precious about who they would let have the license and how it was going to be true and accurate to Tolkien's lore. That's not the case anymore. They'll let pretty much anybody do anything. There's been a massive relaxation in the licensing for reasons that would probably bore you, which I find very, very interesting, but are not always good. I think some of the things that Lord of the Rings has done with the licensing recently have not been great. Anyway, I digress. I'd be very interested to know what they're going to do here, because it would make a difference to me. If I knew they were bringing out Lord of the Rings, I might not buy one. I was looking to buy a Lord of the Rings in sort of February, March, that sort of time, April possibly. That was my next game. It's a dream theme for me. Would I buy one if I knew that they were making a Spike 2 Lord of the Rings? Oh, do you know what? I'm not so sure. And what about Ghostbusters? I wasn't thrilled with the game, as I mentioned. I thought there were some really nice shots on it. I loved the subway. I thought that was great. It was such a packed and populated playfield. They just don't seem to make games like that anymore. There were a few things I didn't like. I didn't mind the magnetised slings or whatever they were. That was absolutely fine. I got it. It was meant to be It's meant to be haunted, so I don't mind that dragging the ball away. It was Scolari Brothers. I didn't particularly like that part of it, and certainly on the premium, there was a small ramp down at the sort of front right as you look at the pinball machine. Very tight ramp. I didn't like that very much, but so I don't think I'd be in a massive hurry to get Ghostbusters, but it is a good game. And I think if you could get that with the movie footage, that would really take that to another level. So there's some of them that it would. I'm not sure Spider-Man needs to be redone. I don't know. I think you miss a lot on Ghostbusters by not having the movie footage. I think you miss a lot on Lord of the Rings, maybe, by not having the movie footage. I'm not sure you do on Spider-Man. Maybe some of you would think differently, but it's a great game. But certainly if you take Ghostbusters, Lord of the Rings and Spider-Man, I know they're sort of different eras, aren't they? They don't make them like that anymore. Stern don't make machines as solidly as they did then. I remember relatively recently, being around my friend John's house and playing 24. Ugly machine. It's packed. It's built solidly. We had X-Men here. It was really solid. It was packed full of toys. So I think for Stern to recreate these games, they're going to have to do things that they weren't doing up until recently. You remember when you saw the Jaws reveal? And I think it was George Gomez was stood aside the machine. And I like Jaws, let me be fair. Jaws looks like a good game. I want to play it. I'm very, very interested. I'd like to get one. I'm in. With the Jaws theme, I am in. But they made a big fuss about the sculpt, didn't they? And it was the chum bucket. And they said this is a bespoke sculpt, and this chum bucket is been made by us. I think the reason they were boasting about it was because they don't make so much of that stuff. You know, I think there's a lot of stuff. They've been guilty maybe in recent years, Stern, of buying parts from other manufacturers maybe. I don't mean pinball manufacturers. They'll buy a toy that you might find on Amazon or a toy that you might find on eBay or whatever, and they'll put it into their game. So I think when they actually create their own sculpture, they'll boast about it. Stern never would have used to boast about that because they did that all the time, it seemed. They would always create a load of their stuff. put it this way, if they're going to recreate Spider-Man, if they're going to recreate Ghostbusters, if they're going to recreate Lord of the Rings, they're going to have to do a whole lot more than just sculpt a bucket with some blood and guts in it. That's just going to be what they have to do. So I'll be very interested to see what they did there. Game of Thrones, that's another one that could really elevate that game. It really could. In many respects, it sort of suffered, didn't it? I think it was one of the. It seemed to me like one of the last few. I think Ghostbusters was the last one, but certainly, Game of Thrones and Walking Dead. These are really popular TV shows, and I think they would have lent themselves more to having some of that screen footage on there, some of that movie footage. It'd be interesting. Be really, really interested to see what they do. So well done. I mean, I think this is a great thing to do. If they can keep producing new titles, and do that, and bring some of their old games out, then I think that's great as well. I mean, as somebody that's maybe struggled to get some of these older games, and Lord of the Rings is a great case in point. There's clearly not enough of them to go round, so make some more. Make some more. I'll take one, absolutely. Unless I get one first, but you get what I mean. Let's just go to this limited edition story for a moment before we wrap up. Just keep this a sort of short video. So they're no longer going to do limited editions. They will just do pros and premiums. However, they will still do sort of anniversary editions, special editions. And they are going to be based on the premium. So here's what I take from it, because the information's quite vague. You'll get your pro and you'll get your premium. The premium will have the extra mechanisms, but I think the premium still won't be powder coated. In terms of the armour. A lot of people get that stuff done themselves. And by the way, if you go onto Pinball Heaven at the moment, who are the UK's pinball distributor, go and check out Pinball Heaven if you wanted to get your armour powder coated. That's something that can be arranged for you, even on a new machine as well. Go and the website, as always, is in the description below. I think that Stern will powder coat their special editions. And I think this sort of makes sense if you're a limited edition owner. Because I think if I'd purchased in good faith, let's say an Elvira House of Horrors limited edition, and I thought that was the premier model, that the very best Elvira House of Horrors that I could buy was the limited edition. Not only am I buying the game, I'm buying the exclusivity. I'm buying it because it's special. That's it, isn't it? It's special and it's limited and it's got the plaque on it. I think I'd be very, very disappointed if somewhere down the line I then saw the blood red edition, which is gorgeous, isn't it? And so I think by them taking the limited editions out of the market, I think that sort of stops that happening. That's far from the only game, of course. You had the anniversary edition of Jurassic Park recently. Now, I couldn't say whether that looks any better than the Jurassic Park limited edition. I don't know. I'm not sure it is. But I would understand people that bought the Jurassic Park limited edition being annoyed that Stern had brought out this special edition. So them scrapping it, I think, is a good thing. As long as the premiums, the Stern premiums, don't go up in value, in price, I think that's fine. And I mean, certainly they've seen the price decrease slightly. They're still... Sterns are still expensive machines in the UK. They're not the budget machines I've mentioned that they are in the States. But the price has decreased slightly in the UK with the Jaws release. And that's a good thing. Seeing prices go down is really, really good. I just hope that this lack of a limited edition doesn't mean that Stern are going to chuck another £500 onto the price of a premium. Because them coming down is the right thing to do. Anyway, but that doesn't overly impact me. I don't buy limited editions. I would never buy a special edition or anything like that. I quite enjoy the process of buying mods for a game. If you've ever seen my Godzilla on here, or my Elvira House of Horrors, or the Jurassic Park I did up, or my Deadpool, I like getting the airbrushing done. I like doing the mods. I like making them, a sort of Flipper Armour edition rather than a limited edition. I like doing it myself. So I don't have any need to buy a limited edition. So the news, it's interesting, but it's not as interesting as the Stern news that they're going to go and recreate some of these older games. And there are a lot of these older games. I don't know how many they're going to do. I don't know to what age. It's very vague, isn't it? A DMD game. What about Star Trek? I mean, those films are dated. There's no point. I would think no point in doing that. I think there's a point. There's a point where something becomes retro and when something becomes dated. So I think something that's sort of 25 years old is retro. I don't know how this works. You might have a different view. Something that's 13, 14 years old just looks old and dated. Just looks dated, doesn't it? So I'm not sure how much anybody really wants to see. And I might be wrong here. I think Star Trek is, and I mean the Steve Ritchie, the Stern Star Trek, I think it's based on those movies that had had all the young. I can't even think of any of the actors in it. Simon Pegg was in it, actually. He was in it, wasn't he? Is there any desire to have that? I think they'd probably have to rebrand it. Use the shots. The shots are great. The game is great. Steve Ritchie's design, absolutely excellent. I think that's different. Ghostbusters is so old and so retro. That doesn't matter. It's gone past being old. It's just retro now. I'd say the same for Lord of the Rings. Tron, here's something for you. Not only have I only played Tron once, which I don't remember because I was drunk, I've never seen the film. And I mean the newer version of it. I remember seeing Tron. There was an old Tron years ago. I can't even remember. 30, 40 years ago? I don't know. But I think the newer Tron has got Jeff Bridges in it. I might be wrong. I don't know. The Game of Thrones is an interesting one. Is Game of Thrones old? Yes, it is. But I think the books have been around long enough that's fine. And then if you're into that sort of thing, you might have watched House of Dragon. I think that keeps it sort of up to date. And also, it was so good. I don't think you can compare the recent Star Trek movies with Game of Thrones, which Game of Thrones might be the biggest TV show that's ever been made. And I know someone's going to throw Seinfeld at me. I'm not talking about that. It might be. TV drama, HBO, Game of Thrones, it's up there, isn't it? It's going to be in the top 5. I think something like that stands the test of time. I think that's fine. In the way that a Breaking Bad is still going to be cool to watch in 10 years' time. It won't look too dated. Anyway, those are my thoughts on it. I'm excited. I think it's good news from Stern. I'm pleased they're doing it. I'm excited, but I'm undecided because it has thrown my purchase of Lord of the Rings into complete and utter confusion. But first world problems, I guess, as they say. Pretty good decision to have.